Development Authority meeting for Wednesday, April 3rd. Susan, please call the roll.
Newcomb Clark.
Sorry.
Russ Collins. Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heapja.
Here.
John Lowenstein. Here. John Moa.
Here.
Nader Nassif. Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is audience participation, and Alan Haber has signed up to speak. You have 4 minutes. Please come to the podium.
Thank you. Russ is just arriving. I wanted to, you have later on your agenda from the Partnership Committee, the report, no doubt, of our first meeting with the Partnership Committee. As you know, I'm promoting and have been for quite a while the notion that the library lot should be seen as a civic space and developed for common community use. First described as a common, sometimes described as a park, sometimes described as a city place. So whatever the ultimate name is, the idea is that that central part of town should be seen by you, the Downtown Development Authority, as to be developed for citizen use, for all the people, as a sense that Ann Arbor has a central place, whether it's however you name it, a place that invites all the citizens for a whole variety of uses. And really to see that whole block, including Liberty Plaza, as a civic place. And our particular approach to this, while there are the long-range plans and the Connecting William Street project, and the Parks Advisory Committee is now looking at this, our view is that while these discussions are going on as for the ultimate use of that space, it's an opportunity for the DDA and the various city elements to experiment with short-term uses of how the public could actually be drawn to that place, what kinds of programming could go on. I think it could be appropriate that we see the efforts that we're trying to make on the library lane parking lot surface as connected also with programming in Liberty Plaza, but particularly we're looking at how to draw people to that space and how to see it as a useful public amenity. And this idea took its particular form last November, in the coming of winter, when we heard of synthetic ice as a substance that was being used in many places where the freeze wasn't like it used to be, and in the South, for recreational skating, and have produced, and I think we gave to you and the Parks Commission and the City Council a proposal to that. And we're now dealing with a variety of questions people have raised as to how effective this synthetic ice is, how large it is, and so on. And we're addressing all those questions, and I expect we'll come back to the next meeting of the Partnership Committee with response to those questions. But I just do not want to let the opportunity pass to press again on your mind to see that Ann Arbor needs, and so many people desire, a central place in Ann Arbor that we could begin to call the heart of town. And that's with this notion of developing a skating rink, a dance floor, a meeting place, variety of civic amenities, and also in a longer view to see the building on that lot, particularly over Library Lane and over spaces where the road occupies the surface, as space to build things that are of general benefit for the community as a whole, whether it is a meeting auditorium, such as the library wanted in its development, or whether it is an Ann Arbor museum or art gallery or so on.
Thank you.
Space.
Your time is up.
My time is up. Well, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak for the to the DDA today? All right, seeing none, we will move on the update on City Council's proposed ordinance change. Susan, do you want to comment on that?
So we had on Monday the first reading for a proposed ordinance change to the city DDA ordinance. There was a fair amount of questions asked and answered through a series of caucus questions over the weeks preceding, and then a robust number of questions and answers that night, Monday night. In essence, there are three very large things going forward as part of this ordinance amendment. The first one has to do with a definition of the DDA TIF that would significantly reduce the amount available to the DDA with a permanent cap on how much is captured. There are various confusions around that because, for instance, if an annual interpretation was used versus what's being put forward, that would have some impact but not as dramatic an impact. So there have been a series of questions why this particular interpretation. The second one would be an elimination of the DDA's obligation to its bond issuances. The DDA, as you know, just has taken responsibility for $67 million of projects between the First in Washington, Fifth and Division, and Library Lane projects in the last 2 years. And now, having made those commitments, this ordinance would eliminate the language in the ordinance that's been there since the beginning of the DDA that tax funds that are paid to the DDA due to the captured assessed value shall first be used to pay the required amounts into the bond and interest redemption funds, and that's for the capital improvement projects we take on. So that's a pretty significant policy change insofar as our obligation to the debt, the people who are buying the city's debt. And then the final issue has to do with governance. There are relatively few, well, there are many city boards and commissions, but other than the Parks Commission, there are none that I'm aware of anyway that have term limits. It would establish term limits on the DDA board, and it would eliminate from future participation officials whose roles as electeds on the boards from our taxing authorities. They would no longer be able to serve, such as from the county and the city or library or others. It would also potentially allow the mayor to serve, but it would be on a year-to-year basis. The council would have to come together and decide and make a vote to see if the mayor could serve. So those are the three changes. Again, the TIF would be affected pretty dramatically. No further connection between the DDA and the debt service that's being issued for our projects, and then governance changes. Council has determined that they're going to have, the approval of first reading. We go back for second reading on April 15th. There'll be a public hearing, and the council will renew its conversation at that point.
Bob has a quick question.
And the calculation of the capture and what that means, when you set that forward, are we clear with the city and the rest of the world about how that's interpreted?
We have charts from city staff. The text in the ordinance itself, as put forward, it is, at least from my perspective and maybe from some others, I don't think it's any more clear. It speaks to a general framework, but I think if 5 years from now a DDA or a city were to look at it, I'm not sure that it is as clear as it is. One of the exercises recently, Roger and I met with city staff, and Roger had spent, I think, the better part of almost a week working up the numbers, and using the same language in the ordinance, he arrived at different numbers than city staff. So I think that's one of those elements. We've not yet had a chance to meet with council, so I don't know that they are understanding that this may not be as clear as it might first be perceived. What we've understood from staff, their calculation would result in the elimination of $931,000, almost $1 million from the DDA budget starting next year, and that would eliminate $363,000 from what we're budgeting. And again, you know how conservative would we budget. So there would be an immediate impact on that, and then going forward, there would be a capping that would restrict how much taxes would be captured thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a related question, please?
Okay, but then Roger wanted to speak.
Well, one of the things that confuses me is whether the difference in how to calculate this is a methodology difference or if it's a mechanics of doing the actual calculation difference. And related to that is there are a bunch of DDAs in the state, and it just seems as though there should be some standards out there it's something I don't fully understand, and so I'm hoping.
I can speak to the second one, and I'll let maybe Roger answer the first one. Each CDA is created by their own community with a completely unique development plan and TIF plan. So there is not a one-size-fits-all.
Darn, okay.
And that's an important consideration. Our own TIF has been around for quite a while, and so we've been operating under, I think, a basic shared understanding, but what we're understanding is not everybody now in the present agrees with what was done in the past.
Thank
I'll
you.
leave that to you.
Roger wanted to speak. He is our treasurer of the DDA.
And I think as the treasurer, I think I have a fiduciary responsibility to at least talk about what the impacts are here. I guess the first thing that I just find disturbing, disappointing is that in my time on DDA board, this is the first time that council has decided to take action without any discussion with the DDA on what the impacts of this proposed ordinance might be. We have essentially been out of the loop, which to me has been unprecedented and makes it difficult to understand exactly what the goal is of this ordinance. From the two things I think I find most troubling, and I think Susan, just to reiterate sort of what Susan said, is the DDA over the last few years has undertaken $67 million worth of infrastructure improvements to the downtown. We put forth a very detailed financial plan to do that with, one of which, the basis of which, is in the ordinance that debt service would be paid off before there was any rebate of TIF back to the taxing authorities. By changing that language, we have changed the financial basis on which we put that plan forward. We've spent the money. You're saying the change is now that you're going to have to play by different rules after we had the whole financial plan approved by City Council and again spent the money. The second part is this, as Susan alluded to, this confusion on how this should actually be calculated, a supposedly annual method versus a cumulative method. As Susan alluded to, I took the language in the proposed ordinance and looked at it and came up with some financial projections. We met with Tom Crawford and Matt Horning of the city. They had taken the same language and come up with an entirely different way of calculating that with different numbers. If you're talking about calculating how much money...
And it was the city numbers that were presented at council.
Correct. Those are the city numbers that were presented. And I'm not saying who's right or who's wrong,
just for clarity.
Yeah, the city numbers were what was presented, and I have no statement over the correct way because it's clear that there is no formula in the proposed ordinance that guides us how to make this calculation. We are talking about a mathematical calculation, and if this ordinance is supposed to bring clarity to how that is done, it certainly, in this aspect, falls far short of it because it is certainly still wide open to interpretation. And it seems unclear from almost anybody exactly how we were supposed to interpret that. So those two, I think, are the two main parts of the ordinance that I find, from a financial standpoint, troubling. Because we have made these financial obligations that with bond sales go out over 20 years, we need to go and reevaluate our 10-year budgets and our 10-year plans based on this proposed ordinance. Without clarity on how that calculation is being done, we cannot even go ahead and make our projections on how to adjust our long-range planning. Assuming that we at some point soon can get clarity on how that should be done, I think as a treasurer we need to reevaluate our budgets and our 10-year plans based on a new reality. And I think we have to look at everything in our budget, all our commitments, and put everything on the table. I think there should be no sacred cows on what gets saved and what doesn't. It's, again, very unclear what the long-range implications of this are going to be, and as someone who does long-range projections, what may be a small impact in the first few years can multiply into a very large impact over a 20-year span, which is what we look at. So I think the Operations Committee needs to sit down, try and get clarity on what, assuming this ordinance goes through as written, get clarity on what it actually means financially, and then reevaluate both our current budgets and our 10-year plan, focusing on what our core mission is, which is infrastructure improvement to encourage economic development of the downtown. It's obviously going to be the board decision on what that finally looks like, but we would be, I think, remiss in our financial responsibilities if we did not immediately take up that challenge. Taking a longer view, which is what, after all, the DDA is here to do, I started working downtown shortly after, as Russ knows, shortly after the DDA was formed at the Michigan Theater. I've been working downtown for nearly 30 years, owned a business for nearly 20 years. I think there's quite a tendency to look at the way downtown is now and think that it wasn't that different 30 years ago and won't be that different 30 years from now. And having been here, I can tell you that's simply not true. 30 years ago, downtown was a rapidly declining retail area in trouble. And it has now evolved into one of the most vibrant downtown areas with dining, entertainment areas that you can find in the country, certainly in the Midwest. And that just didn't happen to evolve. If the DDA had not been there to build 6 new parking structures, to rebuild the sidewalks, to dramatically reconstruct the 2 remaining parking structures, the downtown wouldn't look the way it does now. The city fathers and city council 30 years ago, I think, had the wisdom to recognize that there were going to need to be major infrastructure improvements if the downtown was going to prosper in the long run. And they had the wisdom to set money aside, knowing that there is always political demand to be able to use what money you have now. But by setting that money aside, we were able to do these infrastructure improvements that have allowed the transformation of downtown. As a retail area, there is a much lower demand for parking than there is in a dining and entertainment district. You have many more people in your stores, in your restaurants, many more employees. Without the parking to support that, Ann Arbor could not have evolved to what we have now. I hope that our current city government can look forward and say that we need to set money aside to be able to do those infrastructure improvements in the future, whatever those might be, so that our children and our grandchildren can enjoy the kind of vibrant downtown that we are. It doesn't just happen. You need to put money aside. You need to have that to be able to do those sorts of improvements, whatever they may look like in the future. You have to keep reinvesting in your downtown, or you're not going to have the economic development that seems to be a goal of everyone. So I propose as soon as we have clarity from City Council, I think we need to have the Operations Committee focus on what budgetary changes, what projects need to be removed or adjusted, and engage in a board discussion on that.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will hear from Ray Detter.
Just a little more on that conversation.
Okay, Mayor Hicks.
I appreciate Roger's concerns about the budget. I share those, both long and short term. One of the things that I think, though, that we're running into is that there's a deficit in education about what the DDA does. And I think I see some of that played out at City Council and some of it played out in the community. So that hopefully out of this process, that could be furthered. I appreciate your words, Roger. Also, one of the things that I don't think, and perhaps it's because we have some new council members as well understood, is that as the recession unwound and city governments across the state really found themselves in great difficulty. I'd note ours is one that had made it through the recession with a millage rate that is now incrementally lower than it was in 2000. Many cities across the state can't say the same. In places like Grand Rapids, they raised the income tax. But There was also a time there when the city needed help and reached out to the DDA. When the county told the city they needed to move out of the courthouse and we needed a new police courts building, a police station we'd never really had before, a place to house the courts. The DDA stepped up to the plate and was willing to commit to that. Implicit in that, though, I think, was an understanding that the city was not going to then turn around and change, in effect, the DDA's funding and their ability to uphold that commitment. And then we reached out to the DDA and renegotiated, not always easy conversations, the parking agreement. And I think implicit in that is also the fact that we're partners in this and we're moving down the road together. And there was a lot said on Monday night, but I think this was an issue that probably hasn't been explored enough. The DDA has been an excellent partner to the city. And I think in those two, both the police courts building commitment and the renegotiation of the parking contract, something the DDA didn't have to do, there was implicit an idea that the city is not going to then come back and pull the rug out from under you. The DDA, we here at this table have a fiduciary relationship to the DDA, to this authority, to this budget. I happen to have the same obligation to both parties, the city and the DDA, and was working throughout these years to serve, I would say, my greater priority, the city budget. But I greatly appreciate the help that the DDA has offered, and I think we need to help in communication to make sure that people are aware of this partnership and that these commitments were made in good faith. And I hope that the city will be able to uphold its side of this good faith agreement.
Thank you very much.
And Raj, you may need to correct me, but going back to your framing of the situation as when the DDA was formed versus now, I believe I heard you say that when the DDA was formed, the taxes downtown were about $1 million.
They were, the taxes, the city captured about $1.5 million in what is now the DDA area when the DDA was formed.
And the parking system was
lost about $250,000.
Yes. So the net proceeds to the city
about $1.25 million
were about $1.25 million
30 years ago.
And today there's about a $4 million capture.
The city captures about $4.1 million in the DDA district,
plus
an additional $3.1 million out of the parking fund, not to mention the about $500,000 for the police court building. So the city 30 years ago,
that's about a 10-fold increase, 10-fold increase in revenue to the city from when there was no DDA to the current DDA.
Absolutely correct, yes.
And I guess one other thing, if in that calculation is the number of things we've taken on that the city would have had to take on, ADA compliance, a lot of the lighting issues that we've addressed. So I think it's even higher than what you're saying.
But yes, in sheer dollars, the city's getting a little bit less than $8 million a year from the DDA, and it got about $1.25 million out of the DDA area 30 years ago. And yes, I would absolutely say that would not have happened if there had been no reinvestment in the infrastructure of downtown.
And I would like to, Bob, go ahead.
I won't repeat what's been said, except to stress how important that long-term fiscal stability has been for the DDA and how to change and why change that now and to change it now. I think by eliminating the commitment to make sure we have enough money to make our bond payments, but even more importantly, how we do our 10-year plan, how we can continue to do the things we've done. I won't repeat what Roger said, but I did want to say a word about the governance issue and term limits. In my observation, I've been in county government and now the DDA for a while. The most successful boards and commissions do not have term limits. They have term limits in terms of every 2 or 4 years the appointing body gets to reappoint them. We were all appointed by the mayor with the approval of council, so the council and the mayor can term limit us whenever they want to. But more importantly is to have a mix of more seasoned folks on these boards and commissions who can see the long term, who have been there from the beginning. I think, and this is only my personal opinion, that we've seen the disadvantage of that at the state level because of term limits. But in a body such as this that is very concentrated on a mission, I find it very important to have folks that have been with that mission, that can carry that mission on, and when new citizens come on, they can share that. So I see no reason to impose city or term limits on the DDA. I think that's a mistake.
Joan?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of things in watching the council deliberations the other night. I'm sort of with Councilmember Briere on the math part of all this is not my strong point, and I think more of the public, not that I'm pointing out that that's not Councilmember Briere's strong point, but that's what she said.
I should remark that Councilmember Briere is in our audience.
Yes, right. But that it's really the public policy part of it that I think that it bears looking at too. And there are kind of two public policy issues here. One, at least when I was on council, we always used to say, well, if there's an ordinance change, you ought to look at this much more strictly than, say, just a resolution, because ordinances are kind of written in stone, or at least the digital equivalent of that. And so when you're making an ordinance change, you better be awfully sure that this is something that you want to be there for a very long time. And this ordinance change is really based on calculations that nobody agrees on that stem from the downtown development plan, which has an appendix that estimates what the growth is going to be in the downtown. So if year number one of that estimate is incorrect, then all those other estimates are also incorrect. So this ordinance is based on a fallacy, and the calculations are based on fallacies, and that just doesn't make sense for an ordinance change. The other public policy issue is that I think the original ordinance language that put any kind of cap on what the TIF was misguided. And I looked back a long time ago at the history of it, and the people who were objecting to the TIF capture were people who said we really should not be taking money out of the schools. And it was really only objection to taking school money that really got people stirred up. Well, we don't take school money anymore. So that whole question about TIF capturing money that could be used for education is moot. And I think as a matter of principle, if you're looking at investment, whether it's your own personal investment or your business, or in this case it's our city, you don't stop your investment at the point when you're doing well. And we are just getting to the point, we did so much belt tightening, we are now getting to the point where we can see that we're really doing well. And this is not the time to stop investment. So the idea of a cap on something that continually increases your economy just doesn't make sense. And so aside from all of the arcane mathematical questions about how you calculate things, I think we really have to fundamentally look at whether this is good public policy, and it clearly is not.
Thank you, Joan. Any further, John?
One quick thing that I'd like to speak to is as a policy issue, is the position of elected and former elected officials on the DDA. As a non-politically connected sort of person on this board, I just want to express my gratitude, and I see value in having folks who know how the city works and the county and, you know, the machinations of it all. Because for those of us who aren't involved, it's a challenge sometimes to understand how all these moving pieces work together. So, you know, I've appreciated those folks being on this board, and I've also never, ever had an experience where those folks have tried to sort of coerce or direct or do anything to the rest of us. You know, we've always been very independent, and everyone's opinions don't always agree. And so I just want to express my appreciation of those of you who've been elected officials and over the years, and I think it's worked very well.
Thank you, John. Any further comment? Keith?
Just very briefly, just want to thank the mayor's comments about it, because this is one of the things why this is such a surprise to me, because it's been a relationship that, though there have been difficult discussions over the years, it's been a relationship that's worked very well. And so it's very difficult to be in this position suddenly. Why are we fixing something that does not appear to be broken? And he made the comment about, you know, newer council members, and indeed, you know, that's one of the things about long-term solutions. We've talked all about infrastructure. Infrastructure are long-term solutions, and not two-year solutions. So we have to think the long-term. Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Next we have Ray Detter. Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be here.
He's been on vacation for a while, so we're glad to see you.
Following up on what's been discussed, members of the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council were really bewildered by what seemed to some of us to be an irrational negative attack upon the DDA by certain members of City Council last Monday night. The CAC highly values the importance of vision, strong leadership, and strategic planning in shaping the future of downtown. That creative vision requires a focus that moves beyond political control and power essential for city government to provide for general operations and specific needs. The downtown requires special attention. We believe that only the DDA is uniquely equipped with the creative focus and the economic tools necessary for the strategic planning that enables us to realize our long-term community goals for the downtown. Last night, members of the CAC asked me to assure you that this remains our belief, and we will publicly express it at every opportunity. There was a second item that they asked me to talk about today, one which is very close to my heart, close to me in terms of other sorts of ways, and that is that the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council strongly supports the long-promised review of A2-D2 zoning to make recommendations to amend the current D1 zoning regulations. We also support the City Council with decision to reconvene the Design Guidelines Task Force to review and make recommendations to City Council regarding improvements to the city's design guidelines and design review process. We all know that Council in 2009 adopted the D1, D2 zoning after considerable discussion and uncertainty, and did it as a trial, really, expressly stating at various times that it would revisit the zoning and design guidelines and process after a year or more. But we now see how the zoning is working, not very well in some cases. It's flawed and not supportive of Ann Arbor's downtown and central area master plan commitments. Out-of-town developers come to and tell us that their projects are by right. They produce or promise buildings that ignore the suggestions of our Design Guidelines Review Board, as well as the policy directions of our adopted city master plans and ordinances. Just look at the Varsity student high-rise on East Huron and its negative impact on the Baptist Church, historic properties to the east, and nearby Old Fourth Ward, historic houses to the west, indeed to the entire East Huron streetscape. Another example of the failure of our downtown zoning and voluntary design guidelines is the proposed giant student high-rise proposed at 413 East Huron. Both Varsity and 413 East Huron are massive, unfriendly structures that conflict with city master plans. The commercial core meets, here I am, yeah. The city's central area plan recognizes potential conflicts in areas where the downtown commercial core meets low-scale downtown residential areas. I should say also, I've lost my glasses on my trip, and these are $4 Chinese glasses that I'm trying to read. Follow with. Yeah. Low-scale downtown residential. Our 2009 downtown plan includes a section of development character and sensitivity to context. It establishes as a goal, this is a quotation, encourage design approaches which minimize the extent to which high-rise buildings create negative impacts in terms of scale, shading, and blocking views. In the case of 413 East Huron, our Historic District Commission recently passed a resolution saying that 413 East Huron threatens the preservation of significant historic resources in the adjacent Division Street Historic District. We believe that the Citizens Advisory Council believes that these projects and zoning areas ignore the goals of city master plans and historic district ordinances. They stretch their floor area capacity with unwarranted housing premiums, create massive and pedestrian unfriendly structures, reject the advice of our Design Guidelines Board, and yet insist they are by right. Nearby, and I've handed out a diagram which has been made, which is a diagram really of what is currently possible under the existing D1. 416 only being an expression of that. The strip of East Huron includes multiple parcels that could be developed, some with 150-foot restrictions, some with a maximum of 180 feet, like the U of M Credit Union parking lot next to City Hall, and the hands-on museum site itself that allows for 180 feet on that particular site. These are right across the street from residential historically designated neighborhoods we are committed to protect. We think it's time to keep our promise. D1 zoning ordinances and design guidelines processes need to be examined and to be improved. Thanks.
You did very well in spite of your glasses and your jet lag.
And I have some $7.
$4 if anybody needs it.
I've got a $7 reader if you want to borrow.
Thanks, Ray. I'd like to, are there any further communications from DDA members at this time?
I would just note that, and many of you may have heard this already, that the City Council did vote to send along to the Planning Commission with a pretty tight time frame, October, to report back to us. We're going to do our best to hold the Planning Commission to that, to review the zoning in the blocks on the north of Huron, for a block of South William. So this is between 4th and Packard. And I may be missing something, but also to look at the residential premiums, because one of the things that could change, I know there's many of us that would like to see more housing, and although there is some, and many of the new proposals have quite a few 1 and 2 bedrooms included in them, more than I think is publicly known, but also more of an emphasis on housing for working people, for anyone who wants to live in downtown other than just students. And so the residential premium could see a change in that direction as well that would influence more building. I think there's a real demand with the amount of hiring that is going on, particularly around the Borders building and along Liberty there, for engineers to work in downtown. There's a lot of demand for that housing right now. So that's another change that could take. But that is all, appreciate the word, that is all underway now. And Planning Commission, I'm sure we'll be getting right to that.
Thank you. Any further communication from DDA members? Seeing none, could we have a motion to approve the minutes of March 6th?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
Are there any additions or corrections? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It passes. Operations Committee, Roger.
Okay. If you will turn to, I believe, probably the last page on the packet, we just have the February parking report. I should say before I get into the details of this, we've been working with Republic Parking to do a couple things. One, give some description of events during the month that would affect the parking revenues and the parking usage, so comparing it with the same month a year ago. We're also getting very close to being able to get on the hourly parking the actual average stay. So as we, instead of now looking at, well, did number of patrons go up and down, did the actual usage, the overall number of cars, number of hours used go up and down. So as our systems get a little more sophisticated, our databases get more sophisticated, we're going to be able to give more detailed information and hopefully better insights to how the system is actually working. There's been a tremendous investment on the DDA to upgrade equipment, both equipment going into the parking equipment and the structures, as well as the software and hardware to capture this data and be able to manipulate it. So we're optimistic we're going to be able to give you in the future even more detailed and hopefully more useful information than we currently are doing. Given that, so you can see our overall revenues are up another strong 12.5% approximately. Again, as I say, I think every month there is a rate increase is part of that, and that will continue through next September, at which point, since there have been no rate increases since that time, we will be able to do an actual comparison of actual increase in revenue due to increased usage. But I would suspect our increased usage is somewhere in the 5% range, and as it has been consistently for probably a year and a half now. Hourly patrons down slightly. Again, as you look at the narrative, last year was a leap year, and this year, without that, we had one less business day. We have a lot more meter bags this year in February than we did in February last year. Increased meter bag revenue, less parking meter revenue, and also a substantial increase in the number of free meter bags that we gave out to nonprofit organizations. Again, which we love.
I get no free meter bags. I pay for all the meter bags.
I wasn't implicating anything with that, Russ. Are you sensitive or something?
I'm feeling guilty.
That's because you're special.
Does have a little negative impact on parking revenue, but certainly worth it. So that's the overview of the parking report. I certainly will try to answer any specific questions, should there be any.
Any questions, John?
I've got a question. Looking at Maynard, the number of hourly patrons in February 2013 is approximately 5,000 less than February 2012. Do you know by any chance what that represents in terms of the capacity of that structure, what from a percentage point of view and our goals? Part of the goal of building the new parking structure was to create some flexibility. I'm trying to understand if we've accomplished that, and if so, kind of.
That's sort of a difficult question to answer, and I think we actually are working on trying to get some more specific numbers on what percentage, when we hit our peak capacity, what is that capacity? Maynard has almost always been at its peak over 90, so usually over 95% capacity. When we opened the Library Lane parking structure, we did have a few monthly parkers that moved out, but most of the monthly parkers that moved out of the Liberty Square structure, not the Maynard structure. And we don't have a tremendous number of monthly parkers in Maynard. I think it's roughly 100 or so, and those are due to a contract that goes back decades before the DDA was in charge of it. So I guess no, I don't have a good answer, although we are continually in operations trying to come up with better data to analyze how things are going.
It'd just be valuable to understand the trends for all the different structures and what it's meaning. From economic development, where new buildings are going in and all that. Obviously, the better
we talk about that a lot, and it's a very dynamic system, and there are a major U of M construction project can have a huge impact on one particular structure while that's going on. Just as an example of the dynamic. Changing Liberty Square from a strictly monthly into a monthly and hourly. Initially the usage of the hourly was down, but now it's starting to pick up as people become more familiar with it. So that you've got a moving target you're trying to shoot at to get answers from, and it's not easy.
I understand. Thank you.
Russ?
So just
You know, folks notice that the use of this month was 2,000 less, 2,000 folks less. Just in terms of financial impact, if you take that one missing day, on average, would contribute more than $50,000. So the reduced usage is almost exclusively because there was literally one less day.
Yeah.
So,
And it's something as simple and as small as that can have that kind of impact.
right.
Thanks for pointing that out.
And it was cold.
And it was cold.
And Maynard had 2 less spaces.
And
That might have not had a major impact.
I assume that's for the bike.
That's 6,000 on average, but the actual number is higher than that because obviously on Sunday we don't count folks. So, I mean, the average use per day was higher than a year ago.
Yes.
Any more, Roger? Any more questions
No,
for
I wish I had all the wisdom of numbers and formulas to be able to say, well, everything is because of this, but it's hard to figure out. It makes it challenging to plan because, you know, you take a period of time trying to put a plan in place. The dynamics may have changed between the time you started it and the time you actually implement it. And but
the trends are positive.
The trends are very positive.
And in a long-term sense.
In a long-term sense, we have one of the most, probably one of the fastest growing parking systems, certainly in the Midwest. As I think I've pointed out over the years, during the economic slump, depression, whatever you want to call it, around 2009, our usage leveled off, but it didn't really decline. And in the last 18 months, 2 years, we're seeing strong increases almost every single month. It certainly is one of the indicators of a strong economic growth in our downtown. Certainly not the only one, but certainly an indication of it.
And clean, safe, and well-lit structures.
Yes,
Yes,
we have Republic
indeed.
Parking to thank for that. They do an excellent job of maintaining our structures and operating our structures. And they are clean and safe and well-lit.
Thank you. John Millett, do you have any report on transportation?
Yeah, I can give you a quick update on a few things. One is the bike house, remember, is going in. The notion is that in the next couple of weeks, the basic structure will be put in, and then soon thereafter, the equipment to support it will go in. And the thinking right now, and talking with Amber, is that in association with Nancy Shore, maybe it'll be sort of a soft start with the idea of really trying to promote it as part of Bike to Work Week, second week of May, I believe it is. Would be a great opportunity to sort of promote it and let the community know that it's out there and functioning. It gives us maybe a week or two to get any bugs out. So I think that's all very positive. I don't really have anything to report on the bike share program. Nothing particularly new or interesting happening on that one. The other thing that I want to let people put on their radar screen is that Amber's been having some conversations with Connie Pulsiver about that notion of looking at potential standards for streetscapes, pedestrian improvements. What we've struggled with over the years, that notion of what all should be on sidewalks and not on sidewalks and where and how. So Amber's kind of pursuing understanding what other communities do in that regard and just see whether it's something that could be a good idea for downtown Ann Arbor. And again, working in association with folks at the city to plan that.
Thank you, John.
I have one other transportation
Yes,
note.
sir.
I'm serving on the steering committee for the study of the location of a downtown commuter rail station. We had our first meeting, pretty informative about the demands and limitations, federal regulations on rail stations. very preliminary at this point, but I'm starting to get the parameters of what's required both in area-wise and from a number of factors of where that station could be located. We're looking at an area along the railroad tracks, obviously, from Hill Street on the south to as far as Summit on the north. I will keep people posted. And again, this is a alternatives analysis, much like the connector study is going through an alternatives analysis, funded by money from the federal government and MDOT, and under the supervision, actually of AATA, and along with MDOT's participation in it. So I will keep people informed, because now we only have one meeting, and we're on the very preliminary information gathering stage.
Thank you, Roger. The next item is the partnerships report. Joe.
Yes, very conveniently, Sandy has left me again to give the partnerships report. We haven't had that much going on at partnerships. As you heard, we did have Alan Haber and Stuart Gordon to present some items about the ice rink, and we asked them for more information, and they are welcome to come back at our next meeting. And that's pretty much it. Our next partnerships meeting is April 10th at 9 a.m.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and I would like to, one thing I forgot to mention during the commentary, I think we would be remiss to not mention that this is going to be a big weekend downtown.
Yes.
Because there's the full moon on Friday night and then Festive Fools on Sunday. So I'd like to encourage it.
There also might be some people downtown watching.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. So everything will be really hopping downtown.
Isn't there a hash bash too?
You don't want to mention it.
Not a DDA sponsored.
Yes, it's
Business for some of our members.
Right. Okay,
No
is there any
comment on
other
that.
DDA business, John?
I should actually point out that our next operations committee meeting is on a different day and time, April 26th, Friday, April 26th at 10 a.m.
10.
I will not be at that meeting. I will be out of town.
At 10.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
These Fridays are difficult.
Is there anyone else? Oh, John, go ahead. Do you have something to say? All right. Any other people from the audience who wish to speak to us? Please approach the podium, give us your name, and you have 4 minutes.
I am Thomas Partridge, recent candidate for the 53rd Michigan House of Representatives seat and the 18th District Senate seat. I am here today to speak to all of those without good transportation or housing in the city and the income and ability to speak at these meetings, which are actually shadow meetings of the Ann Arbor City Council, complete with the attendance and participation on this board of the mayor of the city of Ann Arbor. I am here to call on this city to reorganize its charter and expand the downtown development physical area covered by what is defined as the downtown development area to include every important commercial and housing development within the city of Ann Arbor, certainly every housing development and planned housing development to serve seniors and disabled persons and be termed affordable housing. That would give this committee a new charter and a new purpose, and in so doing give a new purpose to the entire city of Ann Arbor. We are still, unfortunately, we were perhaps in the very, very beginning of the city of Ann Arbor, a segregated city, segregated between the wealthy and the super wealthy, the middle, what could be termed the middle class, and a significant and growing proportion of senior citizens and disabled persons on fixed incomes not served by Mayor Heafke and the Ann Arbor City Council, not served by this authority. This authority could generate additional revenue in several areas, and your only significant source of revenues, understand, is parking revenues, and you're giving away 1/7 of each week's potential parking revenues under the theory that people would not park in parking structures, would not want to do business in the city of Ann Arbor on Sunday. I dismiss that. I think that you should have a parking fee, even if it's a reduced fee on Sundays, and at the same time, you should reform the entire parking fee structure to give free or very low parking fees for senior citizens and disabled persons, and give out free parking spaces for seniors and disabled persons in parking structures adjacent to or near senior citizen residential buildings, any building housing significant number of low-income people, including disabled persons. It's partial of the segregation of the city. So number one, I'm calling on you to reorganize your charter, to expand the Downtown Development Authority area to encompass virtually the entire city, to take on the issues of segregated housing, lack of access to affordable, accessible transportation within the city of Ann Arbor and certainly throughout the county and throughout southeastern Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge.
I, as a resident of the city was not able to attend the Detroit Institute
Mr.
of Arts
Partridge, your time
presentation
is
of
up.
the
Thank
Faces
you.
of Jesus this last Christmas season because of the segregated purposes of the Ann Arbor City Council.
Mr.
and
Partridge,
this
your
authority.
time is up. Thank you very much for coming.
You know that you could waive the 4 minutes for a senior, especially for a candidate for the legislature.
Thank you. Good day. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.